Every election season sounds familiar. Politicians promise to fix service delivery. They promise to end corruption. They promise jobs, safety, dignity, and a state that finally works. And then the elections pass. Months later, many people are left asking the same question they asked the last time. Why does it feel like nothing has changed? The answer is not always dishonesty. Often it is something more uncomfortable, something like a misunderstanding about how power actually works. So far in this series, we've looked at how political appointments damage public service. We've looked at how power operates beyond elections, why broken systems hit some communities harder than others, and how incompetence becomes corrupt, and why skilled public servants eventually leave. Today, we're focusing on the thread that runs through it all, the gap between political promises and political power. This episode asks two critical questions. How do we tell the difference between a realistic promise and a promise that is misleading? And why does the distinction matter so much for voters, especially during election times? If political promises sounded cautious and technical, most people wouldn't listen. Campaigns are not designed to explain systems. They are designed to mobilize emotions, to inspire hope, and signal direction. That is why politicians speak in outcomes. They talk about better healthcare, safer communities, more jobs, a rebuilt state. These are goals, they're not instructions. The problem begins when goals are presented as if they are direct actions, as if saying something makes it immediately doable. When that happens, expectations rise faster than systems can actually deliver. To understand promises, I think we first need to understand where power actually sits. So let's break this down simply. What can politicians usually do? They can set policy direction and priorities. They can introduce or support legislation. They can appoint senior leadership. They can influence budgets and oversight focus. They can shape the tone and values of governance. But there are also clear limits to that power. This is what politicians can't actually do on their own. They can't instantly fix broken institutions. They can't legally bypass procurement or labor processes. They can't replace an entire administration overnight. They cannot deliver services without capable systems and skilled people. When a promise ignores these limits, it's not ambitious, it's actually misleading. When big promises collapse, right, accountability hardly stays where it started. Instead, blame moves in predictable directions, from political leaders to officials, from institutions to legacy problems, from systems to communities themselves. We will hear then phrases like, we would have delivered, but. Sometimes that explanation is actually true. Inherited systems can be broken, but sometimes blame becomes just a shield, protecting poor appointments, weak reform, or a refusal to confront institutional failures. And without clarity about power, voters struggle to tell the difference. The greatest damage about overpromising isn't just the disappointment, it's also erosion, because over time, repeated failure erodes public trust. It normalizes the non-delivery. It trains voters to lower their expectations. When promises collapse again and again, people disengage, not because they don't care anymore, but because caring starts to feel pointless. This is how democratic participation weakens quietly without there having to be a crisis. Here is a simple tool that we as voters can use to assess political promises more critically. When we hear a promise, we need to ask, who actually has the authority to do this? What systems must work for this promise to actually succeed? What appointments does it depend on? What timeline would actually be realistic? And what happens if it fails? If those answers are unclear, the promise is unaccountable. It is aspirational, basically just that without a plan. Understanding power doesn't make voters cynical. It makes them harder to manipulate, right? Democracy works best when leaders are honest about their limits, when voters understand the trade-offs, and when accountability is grounded in reality. Elections are not only about hope. They are about responsibility. on both sides, and clarity about power strengthens democracy far more than slogans ever could. In the next episode, we're going to challenge another dangerous myth, the idea that democracy only happens on election day. Because accountability is not a moment, right? It's a system, and voting is only the beginning of that system.